Welcome back to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into a truly historic and honestly, deeply emotional journey. We're going to unpack the incredible story of Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, and we're focusing specifically on his massive migration and his absolute, unyielding stance on monotheism, or Tawhid. We're looking at a huge pivot in history, a moment where one single individual stood up against the sheer scale of ancient Babylon, which, by the way, was the world's absolute epicenter of power and idolatry at the time. Against all odds, he survived the impossible, and then he chose to just walk away from everything he knew. So get ready, because this is a fascinating breakdown of resilience, pure logic, and just absolute faith.
Just imagine for a second what actually happens when you leave literally everything behind for the truth. It's a massive concept to wrap your head around, right? Picture making the incredibly difficult decision to leave the very land you grew up in. You're saying goodbye to your relatives, walking away from your childhood home, and stepping entirely into the unknown. And remember, in the ancient world, your tribe and your city were your only safety net. Leaving them meant risking literal starvation or death. No backup plans. But that is exactly what Prophet Ibrahim had to do. The emotional sacrifice here is just monumental. It wasn't some casual move. It was a profound, dangerous severing of ties for a much, much higher purpose.
Section 1. The Departure. Leaving Babylon.
Okay, let's look at how this timeline actually played out. It all started right after a massive, world-altering event, his miraculous salvation from the fire. I mean, surviving a deadly execution attempt by your own people is a pretty intense step one. But his decision right after that to pack up and journey toward Sham, the Levant, and Palestine, that wasn't just him fleeing for his life like a desperate refugee. Not at all. It was a highly deliberate, purposeful mission. He was intentionally taking the message of truth straight out of Babylon, acting as a vanguard, and carrying it into entirely new, untouched lands where that message had literally never been heard before.
Section 2. The Mission. Spreading Tawhid in New Lands.
So when Prophet Ibrahim finally arrived in the territories of Sham and Palestine, he hit this massive cultural wall. The local mindset there was deeply, deeply rooted in ancestral tradition. People were stubbornly and kind of blindly following the idol worship of their forefathers, mostly out of fear and cultural inertia. It was just, how things had always been done. But against all of that, Abraham offered this profound pivot, a highly logical, completely rational belief in one true creator. It was a completely revolutionary way of thinking for these societies. And the thing is, many people actually listened to his arguments, but to accept them, they had to overcome this massive psychological barrier of abandoning generations of deeply ingrained tradition.
And when he declared to these societies, the creator of this universe is only one Allah, he didn't do it with anger or condemnation or arrogance. Actually, the source material really highlights his unique methodology here. He used profound wisdom, remarkable softness, and just incredible tolerance. Even when he was facing fierce, stubborn opposition, he answered their questions gently. His speech had this specific kind of light and sincerity to it that was so powerful, it was literally capable of dismantling hostility and melting even the most stone-hearted listeners.
Section 3. The Road of Trials. Physical Hardships and Intellect.
Now, taking on a mission of this magnitude demands unimaginable sacrifice. The physical conditions of an ancient migration like this were incredibly harsh. We're talking the blistering heat of the desert, a severe, life-threatening scarcity of food and water, and the constant looming fear of bandits or hostile tribes out on the road. Yet, despite the hunger, the agonizing thirst, and the very real danger, the defining characteristic of this whole phase was his tawakkul, his absolute, unwavering trust in the Creator. His faith wasn't just some abstract theological concept, it was his literal survival mechanism. It stood firm, like a mountain against a storm, and it's what kept him putting one foot in front of the other.
But honestly, the physical survival, that was only half the battle. Intellectually, he was stepping into a completely different arena. During his travels, he ran into societies that worshiped celestial bodies, the stars, the moon, and the sun. And remember, ancient civilizations deeply revered the cosmos. They mapped their entire agriculture, navigation, and theology by the sky. So dealing with this required a totally different approach than smashing stone idols. It required a masterful, completely logical takedown of an entire worldview.
So instead of just telling them their beliefs were wrong, he pulls off this brilliant piece of Socratic deduction. It's almost like a logical thriller. Picture this. He's standing with them under the night sky, right? He observes the stars and the moon with them. Then, he simply points out the obvious reality as dawn approaches. He watches those celestial bodies set, fade, and completely disappear from the sky. And then he drops this brilliant, simple question. How can things that set disappear and change, possibly be God. He deduced, right in front of them, that a true God absolutely must be eternal and cannot be subject to absence or a changing state.
And that led to this triumphant, undeniable conclusion that totally established the true nature of the divine. Through that flawless logic regarding the sun and stars, he made it abundantly clear to his people what they should actually be searching for. The true God is the eternally living creator. He never declines, he never sets, and he is never subject to change. It was a groundbreaking, rational proof of monotheism that used the very universe they were looking at to dismantle their ancient myths.
Section 4. The Legacy, Foundation of a New Civilization.
You know, this entire journey of migration wasn't just a personal timeline. He was actively laying the groundwork for an entirely new way of life. The seeds of a completely new civilization were literally being planted with every single step he took. Because he lived a life so entirely dedicated to the obedience of Allah, everyone who crossed paths with him couldn't help but be deeply influenced by his impeccable character and his firm, unyielding belief. It was his personal example, acting as a catalyst, inspiring a whole new generation of believers and literally altering the course of human history.
And there's a really profound truth here that bridges this ancient history straight to our modern lives. When a person leaves their home for Allah, he opens the paths to success on earth. This is incredibly relevant today. It shows us that when you actually have the courage to step into the unknown, when you make those immense sacrifices and leave your comfort zone for a higher principle and truth, it doesn't lead to a dead end. Instead, it unlocks profound, completely unforeseen paths to true success and a lasting impact in the world.
Look, the path of faith is never easy. Prophet Ibrahim faced the executioner's fire, total exile, the threat of starvation, and deeply hostile societies. But the inner peace and tranquility that comes from that unwavering trust in the Creator, that is far greater than all the worldly wealth, comfort, and status he left behind in Babylon. It's this profound spiritual peace that absolutely cannot be bought or inherited. It can only be earned through absolute steadfastness and conviction.
But here's the thing. The journey of such a monumental figure rarely ends with just one migration. So what other hardships awaited him on his next stop? The trials were far from over, and the tests were only going to get more profound, asking even more of his unshakable faith. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into Prophet Ibrahim's incredible migration gave you a clearer, much more comprehensive understanding of his legacy and his brilliant defense of the truth. Keep seeking knowledge, and I'll see you in the next one.